sad to see the Prime Minister and his office fall so far below the standards of competence and integrity the country deserves. I mean, it's not very good for the Prime Minister. It's definitely backfired, and I think there might have been a strategy behind it, but it wasn't a thought-through one. And I think the fact that it's been reported by Sky and others, the Prime Minister spent Thursday himself personally phoning newspaper editors, but perhaps this wasn't discussed.
Do you think that they have made the decision that because Dominic Cummings went up north knowingly having infection in the family, and then went to Barnard Castle, wink wink, to test his eyesight, do you think that they've made the calculation at Number 10, or Boris personally, that Dominic Cummings is a busted flush and people aren't going to care what he says anyway? Because of that.
Well, I think as you kind of alluded to in your introduction, I think a lot of people have priced in a bit of this stuff with Boris Johnson as well, is that he's not a man of integrity. And, there's a poll in today's Sunday papers from Opinion showing that 37% of the public would describe Boris Johnson as mostly or completely corrupt.
And what were they describing him like 24 hours, 48 hours, 6 months ago?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I would assume it's gone up slightly, but I suspect it wasn't from a very low base. I agree with you. But I think the bigger question is this constant, as I said before, this sort of drip. We've had the Dyson text, we've had the Greensill and Cameron stuff, we've had Hancock awarding contracts to his sister's company and so on. We've had this kind of constant crony contract.
Well, he put them on a list, actually. He put them on a list for possible NHS contracts. He is a 15% shareholder in Topwood Limited, owned by his sister.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, he didn't declare that until afterwards, and it wasn't declared at the time in 2019, I think, when that was awarded. There's been $2 billion of contracts gone to people who are donors to the Conservative Party.
Yeah. And then, of course, everyone's going to say, Andrew, well, what would Labour have done? And what's the best thing for Labour to do now? Do they just sort of sit back and allow the Tory party to just tear themselves apart? Or do they go in and critique? Because a lot of people are going to say, if there is a critique, if there is an attack, they're just going to say, well, you weren't in power, we were in a crisis, we needed help, that's the Dyson stuff. So what? They're refurbing an apartment, the Prime Minister should live in a decent place. A lot of people are going to go, so what, as they try to restructure their lives, they deal with their children's loss of earnings and futures, education destroyed. This feels all to me like it should be, it's going to be pretty low down, ordinary people's priorities, this spat. This is like Hello Mag.
I think that the contrast comes when you see the government in the middle of a pandemic clearly favouring its own party donors, when it's dishonest or at least not transparent about the sources of the money for this refurbishment. I mean, Boris Johnson gets £30,000 a year, more than the average salary, to do up this flat every year. That's in the public budget.
What does he get? How much?
£30,000 is the annual allowance
To do the place up?
Downing Street, yeah. Now that's more than the average salary.
Yeah, but do you want me to freak out? I mean, nobody's going to freak out over that.
Why is he then seeking donors to pay for more?
Well, I don't know.
He's on a £180,000 salary himself. I think he can afford a liquor payment.
And you know something? I'm going to be honest with you, and I can put this out to people as well, Andrew. What do you think about a 180 grand salary for the Prime Minister of this country? I think that's ridiculously low.
I think it's perfectly reasonable, but it's a lot of money. But I think when somebody's on that salary, to then be tapping up donors to do up your flat, I think is pretty pathetic. I think the Greensill stuff with David Cameron is more important.
Listen, I agree. And then there was Bill Crothers as well, the procurement officer, working for the Greensill at the same time. Look, so it's all got a bit of a stage which is going to stick around, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that is, and I think if there's more stuff that comes out over the coming weeks, I think it will just build and build and build, like it did under John Major when you had David Miller and Neil Hamilton and Jonathan Aitken and all those other scandals in the 90s.
And Labour, just very briefly, Labour leave things alone a little bit. How are they to play this senior policy advisor?
Labour's got to do two things. Labour's got to probe these things and make sure they are scrutinised as a democratic opposition should, but it's also got to set out its own programme, its own contrast of what it's doing. I think it's not doing the latter bit sufficiently at this stage, if I'm going to be honest with you, which I always try to be. So I think that's what they've got to do. They've got to set out their own vision for the country to show the contrast. While the Tories are embroiled in all this scandal and stabbing each other in the back, Labour's got to be setting out the priorities of the people of this country.
Andrew, thank you. Andrew Fisher, Senior Policy Advisor for the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn from 2015 to 2019. 7:16 is the time. Listen, we're on off. We'll have a chat with Ollie Barrett. Ollie Barrett will go through the rest of the papers in just a second about this whole Cummings Johnson debate. I'd like to know your views about it. What are you finding out about Boris Johnson now that you didn't know before? 0345 6060 973. Is this a Westminster Whitehall media bubble story? Is there more to it than that? Happy to take your text on 84850. But quite frankly, you know, we're off to India where there is a real crisis going on. We'll discuss that after the news with Holly Harris.
Labour is demanding Boris Johnson clarifies whether he asked Conservative supporters to help pay for the refurbishment of his Downing Street flat. India continues to struggle with a shortage of oxygen supplies as it records record numbers of coronavirus cases for a fourth day. 8 police officers were injured at anti-lockdown protests in central London last night. The weather dry with plenty of sunshine in most parts, a high of 15 Celsius.
LBC Travel, I'm Joanne Webb. King's Cross Mainline Station is closed today for the engineering works. No trains far south as Letchworth, and Great Northern trains are running to either Moorgate or St Pancras via Finsbury Park. On the underground, the Circle and District lines are run to Monument and Sloane Square, and that's for engineering works. On the roads in Berkshire, the M4 is closed in both directions between junction 6 at Slough and 8-9 at Maidenhead, and that's for the weekend roadworks. And also in Holloway, the A1 Holloway Road is closed in both directions all the way down to Highbury, and that's following an accident.
Stormbreak on Sunday, coming up at 10, live from Westminster, LBC.
You can always trust a bit of stargazing to put a twinkle in your eye. So if you're on the lookout for someone to do that building renovation, complete with stargazing skylight, simply visit trustedtrader.com. There you'll find plenty of vetted, reviewed, reliable professionals in an abundance of trades. Like a builder who'll provide the star treatment. For trusted tradespeople, let the superstars align.
All right, Dave. Yeah, great. You sound it. You in the warehouse today, mate? Yeah, got loads on. Reckon you want to get that cough checked first. What did you say to you?
Don't dismiss mild symptoms of COVID-19. They can be dangerous. If not for you, then for someone else. Don't wait, don't guess, get a test. Order one on the NHS COVID-19 app.
For many of us, future plans don't come much bigger than moving home. That's why at Halifax we want to make sure nothing gets in your way. So if you're unable to visit us in branch for a mortgage appointment face to face, we're more than happy to come to you. Every week our colleagues are doing over 3,000 mortgage appointments by phone and video call, so we can keep your moving plans moving along. Halifax, it's a people thing.
Hey, Harry. Hello, mate. Should I back the underdog? We'll risk a few extra quid on the favourite.
Listen, everyone knows I like a bet, but if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's this. No matter what the amount, no matter whether you're backing a player or buying a racehorse, your best bet is never to spend more than you can afford. That's why BetVictor's new affordability measures are specially designed to help you avoid ever spending beyond your means.
Listen to Harry and please gamble responsibly. 18 plus, be gamble aware.
At McDonald's, we're always working to build on our happy meal. Which is why we're giving your little ones the choice of a book or toy, and are ditching hard plastic toys altogether. And why we've recycled old toys into Ronald McDonald House Charities playgrounds. In fact, we're building one right now. Sorry for the noise. Participating restaurants only, served from 11 a.m.
Andrew Castle on LBC.
7:21 is the time. Ollie Barrett is LBC's political correspondent. We have a great line to you now, Ollie. What fun and games then? It continues, doesn't it? Number 10, Boris Johnson versus Dominic Cummings. What may happen next?
Well, if you get a couple of points in the electricity this morning, and we wait to see what plays out over the coming days, because the Labour Party, as you were saying, are hoping to get a senior minister into the Commons on Monday to face questions over some of these allegations that are swirling, and you would expect that there will be more to come from Dominic Cummings. And I think that is really the real worry inside Downing Street at the moment. What else does he have, and when might he be prepared to release it? We know that he's going to be in front of at least one select committee in the coming weeks and is talking about answering any question that is put to him. There's real concern in Downing Street about what exactly he might say about the Prime Minister and whether it was he who was slow to move the country into lockdown on at least one occasion. You were talking earlier about exactly why Boris Johnson may have picked this fight, and there is also a feeling in Downing Street that perhaps Boris Johnson felt that now was the time to do it. 10 points clear in the polls, the vaccine rollout moving smoothly, Britain moving out of lockdown, the public feeling well disposed, it appears, according to much of the polls, towards Boris Johnson and his government, and perhaps he felt this was an oil that needed advancing and that now was a good time to do it. But there is real fear in Downing Street, as I say, that Dr. Cummings may have much more to release than he's already said. Although it is also worth pointing out that Dr. Cummings has some credibility questions.
Indeed, Ollie, thank you very much indeed. Still not a perfect line, but we get the gist of that. Obviously, he's political correspondent Ollie Barrett. Mail on Sunday this morning, number 10 rages at nasty sexist Cummings. And they say, as vengeful advisor is said to be plotting most shocking attack yet, accusing the Prime Minister of being so determined to avoid any more lockdowns, he would tolerate a big death toll. Just, you know what? When we go back and we think about how we all reacted February, March, April last year, before and then at the lockdown and then just after, the decisions made at a time of global crisis, let alone national crisis, do you think that every single decision was going to be perfect? Do you think that the motivation a year or a year and a half later, or 3.5 or 5.5 years later, as we look back and this public inquiry, a series of these things get going, do you think that it's going to be anything other than an utter bun fight, and that everybody is going to be able to point the finger and said, should have done this, should have done that? I mean, okay, nobody's perfect, but what did you think Boris Johnson was like beforehand? 84850, Chris is in Croydon. Get us underway, Chris. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. I hope you'll do the same, Andrew. Look, the point I'm going to make is that Keir Starmer and Dominic Grieve are hardly in a position to take the moral high ground, because democracy is the essence of our governance, and both fought tooth and nail to overthrow the referendum, the Brexit result.
Oh my God, are you bringing Brexit back into this?
No, questioning the integrity of Grieve and Starmer. The other thing is, in his capacity as a human rights lawyer, Starmer must have pocketed tens of thousands of pounds fighting the extradition of dangerous criminals.
Well, I don't have any details of that, and he wouldn't be here to fill in any of those gaps there.
Yes, but the main point is this, Andrew. If Labour want to get at this government, they've got to convince the public that if they were elected, women would feel safe at night. You'd be able to take your pedigree dog for a walk, and with the knowledge you might actually come back with it. The education system would fit your children for employment. For a start, and the exorbitant accommodation costs would be about a third of what they are now.
Well, here, that's a manifesto I want to see from anybody.
Yes, exactly, but that ain't going to happen, unfortunately, under any government. But those are the real issues that concern people, not the colour of the wallpaper in the number 10 flat.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. Mind you, some of those colours, if they're a special finish, let me tell you, hundreds of pounds per square metre. Very, very easy to rack up big bills doing up an apartment. Steve's in Nottingham. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Andrew. I think it's the most corrupt government in the last 100 years.
Good Lord, Steve.
I think it's very, very serious indeed.
Which particular element most offends you?
All of it. The financial corruption, the taxpayers' money, the misappropriation of taxpayers' money mainly, is what it's all about. And you're right, it does go back